As the day unfolds and news and events take shape, we get you complete coverage of every news breaking in, tracking new developments as they happen. Midday Prime English, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. on DD India.
Welcome. It is 7:30 in the evening in India and we are back again with a fresh edition of India at G20. The first joint finance and health task force under the finance track met virtually today under India's G20 presidency. If you are thinking why that meeting is important, then I will give you a brief background on it. The task force was established during the G20 Rome Leaders Summit in 2021. It aims to enhance dialogue and global cooperation on issues relating to pandemic prevention, preparedness and response, among other priorities. For reasons you and me are aware of, over the last couple of years, there has been a lot of focus on financing pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. It is estimated that a minimum of $10.5 billion are needed additionally every year to finance pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. So the question that arises now is, where does the world stand on that currently? On the show today, we ask how can G20 under India's presidency further help, particularly the low and middle income countries in filling critical gaps in pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. We also delve into India's leadership role in the health and wellness sphere. I'm Munmin Bhattacharya. Let's get started with the top stories. India holds first joint finance and health task force meeting as G20 president. Deliberations take place on global health priorities and task force's work plan for 2023 virtually. In the health sector, India's G20 presidency is focusing on building a more resilient, responsive and inclusive global health architecture, digital health innovations and solutions, preventing, preparing for and responding to health emergencies and access to safe, effective, affordable and quality medical countermeasures. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, along with leaders across party lines, attend lunch in Parliament where millet dishes were served. As India prepares to mark 2023 as the International Year of Millets, PM shares the prospect of G20 guests being served millet dishes in India so that they can appreciate the importance of millets. India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant pens his thoughts on the path ahead for India and G20 in November 22 edition of Man Ki Baat booklet. Writes, as G20 president, India will look to emerge as a bridge between the developed and developing states for enhanced cooperation. Terms constitution of a new working group on disaster risk reduction as a unique contribution of India's presidency. G20 Finance Track held its second working group meeting of Joint Finance and Health Task Force in virtual mode today. The task force aims to foster dialogue and global cooperation on issues relating to pandemic prevention, preparedness and response, promoting the exchange of experiences and best practices, developing coordination arrangements between finance and health ministries, promoting collective action, assessing and addressing health emergencies with cross-border impact, and encouraging effective stewardship of resources while adopting a One Health approach. Take a look.
The most severe health crisis in a century. COVID pandemic caused humanity loss of over 6 million lives in different countries. Millions of dollars loss of economy, trillions of dollars in severely disrupted trade, tourism, business, education, geopolitics and much more. 20 crore lost their employment all over the globe. 10 crore pushed into the extreme poverty. Since 2020, the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic largely dominated the work of the Health Working Group. The access to vaccines, therapeutics and diagnostics was at the core of the G20 agenda under the Italian presidency 2021. PM Modi gave the mantra of One World, One Health under Rome presidency. During Indonesian presidency of G20 in year 2022, the new pandemic fund was created. This year in India's presidency, the focus is on to promote digital health innovation and solutions and strengthen cooperation in the pharmaceutical sector. There is also a joint OECD ILO WHO program on working for health. WHO, the agency responsible for coordinating issues of global health, have urged all countries to make a paradigm shift towards promoting health and well-being and preventing disease by addressing its root causes. This also calls for reorienting health system towards primary health care, which can deliver 90% of essential health services. There is a need for IP waiver not only for vaccines but for diagnostics and therapeutics. But whether there will be any consensus on these crucial issues is yet to be seen. There are more meetings of working group lined up for future, and in the physical meeting on health issues at Health Ministry level, India will focus on promoting Ayush and Yoga for the global health. Ajay Mishra's report, DD India, Delhi.
As the world is all set to embrace 2023 as the International Year of Millets, an initiative mooted at the global level by the Government of India, the Union Government hosted a millet-only lunch in Parliament today. On the occasion, members of Parliament cutting across party lines were served dishes made of millets like sorghum, ragi and pearl. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, along with fellow members of Parliament, enjoyed the lunch hosted by Agriculture Minister Narendra Singh Tomar. The delicacies that were prepared today included the khichdi made out of millets, ragi dosa, ragi roti, jawar roti, haldi sabzi, bajra and churma. The sweet delicacies were bajra kheer and bajra cake, to name a few. While briefing media persons after the meeting, Parliamentary Affairs Minister Prahlad Joshi said that as over 85% of Indian farmers are small farmers who grow millets in large numbers, a rise in the consumption of these grains will help them financially. PM Modi also said that millet items can be placed for G20 guests at dinners or wherever possible so that they can understand the importance of millets. So G20 guests will get a taste of Indian millets. To talk about that, as well as the first joint health and finance task force meeting that took place virtually under India's G20 presidency, particularly under the finance track, and of course the benefits of millets, we are joined by Dr. N.K. Arora, Chairman, National Technical Advisory Group on COVID-19 Immunization, and Dr. Sunil Kumar Rena, Advisor, World Health Network and Professor and Head, Community Medicine, Government Medical College, Himachal Pradesh. Such a pleasure to welcome the two of you to this special broadcast, India at G20. Dr. Arora, you are one of those few Indian officials who've seen very closely India's fight against COVID-19, and you would appreciate the need for greater financial resources, particularly for low and middle income countries, for pandemic prevention, preparedness, as well as response. We are aware that under the Indonesian presidency, a pandemic fund of $1.4 billion has already been established, but there is clearly a need for more, because there's an estimate by the World Bank, WHO, and even by G20 that at least $10.5 billion are required every year to meet the financing gaps. Do you think under India's presidency, G20 can move forward in that direction? You can unmute yourself, sir. Yeah.
Can't you hear me? Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. So thank you very much, Munmun, for inviting. And actually the question you're asking is, I would add another dimension, that not only $10.5 billion are required, I think value for money is also absolutely important. And I think a country like India, which basically believes in every rupee or dollar which is used, has to give maximum return on that. And I think our vaccine industry recently has shown that how a very effective vaccine can be available to our people at very, very affordable price not only to the recipient but to the governments, because ultimately these are societal goods. Same is true for diagnostics, therapeutics, equipment which occurred. So I would say that India has a very important leadership role, and also share its experience, how we have utilized every bit of resource available to us to maximize the output and the efficiency with which we can use these resources.
Right. Dr. Rena, taking off from where Dr. Arora left, we've seen the kind of battle India has fought for developing countries. At the WTO, we in South Africa moved for an IPR waiver on drugs, vaccines, therapeutics, but a half outcome could be concluded because of reasons known too many. Particularly the innovators did not want that IPR waiver to go, and the EU also had a similar stand. Now, what do you think in these circumstances can be done to enhance access for the low and middle income countries, particularly to these components?
First, thanks, Mridul, for having me on the show. And as Dr. Arora rightly pointed out, if you look at the way this pandemic has panned out across the world, it has literally divided the world into two parts. One is the resource-rich countries which had the vaccines available to them, and then there were the low and middle income countries or resource-restricted countries like India, for example. We did have our vaccine, and we were willing to part with it. We were willing to give it to the world as such. But broadly speaking, if we really want to make it available or make the benefits or the growth that India has seen in terms of health over a period of time available to everybody across low and middle income countries, we need to help them develop technologies. And these technologies need to be sustainable over a period of time. And these technologies should be dependent, self-dependent. They should not be dependent on what we get from the West or the other countries. So in that sense, what we have learned for a period of time, what we have gained over a period of time, what we have developed over a period of time, we need to transfer it to low and middle income countries and let them grow. Otherwise, what will happen is the way it's happening with other forms of technologies. Now, people talk of climate control, for example, but we don't have the green technology to enforce climate control in all means. So in that sense, I would say India needs to lead its way. India needs to lead the low and middle income countries and show them the way.
Okay. So how can this be done, Dr. Arora, to your mind, with India now the G20 president?
So this has been in discussion for quite some time, and I think there are several options. So I will give you some examples, like simple N95 mask. When we started, each mask was costing 250 rupees, and today and bulk purchase the price is around 17 or 20 rupees per. Now this shows that how efficiently when entrepreneurial skills of countries like India come up, and this is what I think Professor Raina is saying, that we should share this technology as well as help setting up and keeping basic philosophy of India, Vasudev Kutumbam on one side, and the second is Atmanirbharta. I think South-South collaboration is primarily a feature where partners work together as equals rather than collaboration where there is an up and down, there is a senior partner or a lower junior partner. I think the finest way we can take this opportunity of this year, that we convey to the South countries that we are partners and we are ready to share and we are ready to learn from each other. There is another issue, I would say, that some of the technologies which we have developed, for example, genomic surveillance. I think we have cutting edge genomic surveillance network called INSACOG. And as a first step, probably we should expand it rapidly to our South Asian countries as one block where surveillance is done. So while we are working together as partners, we are also preparing for ourselves for any pandemic or epidemic in future, so that there is a self-reliance in the region and we are contributing to each other. Third thing, that some of the high-tech, many times, for example, vaccine manufacturing. India has developed large number of vaccines. In fact, India now has 6 platforms to manufacture different vaccines, and they were all indigenously developed. Now, many times in these other South countries, there may not be technical skill available, but at least we can encourage our industry to set up their units in these countries so that they support other low and middle income countries. And this is itself takes care of IPR issues and other issues, but also shows how India is going to take a proactive role for supporting our brothers and sisters in other resource constrained countries.
Right. Dr. Raina, I have noticed that India has been emphasizing that WHO should play a central role going forward in the implementation of the pandemic fund that's mentioned in the Bali communique, and that was what the Department of Economic Affairs Secretary Ajay Seth also said in a press conference a few days back. Why do you think that is important? Is it being asserted so as to avoid any duplication and fragmentation of the governance structure and various affairs related to how the pandemic fund should be used?
I think you spelled it very well. The fact is that, as I said, this pandemic has thrown up us with many challenges. Every country has taken up to this pandemic in its own way. We didn't have a centralized system of approaching the pandemic. And for that, WHO was probably found wanting in that, in helping countries develop strategies which could be uniformly applied across the world. So we had the lower and middle income countries which couldn't get the vaccines, or they were not prepared enough for this pandemic. Or we had other countries who were much prepared, had the vaccines as well. So in that sense, when India thinks of, or when India talks of that there has to be a centralized agency, and WHO has been in that role for a long period of time now. So they are quite right, because of the fact that then we will be able to have a system which is more equitable in its outreach. And at this point in time, we may be very wary of that fact that we may not have a very equitable approach as far as delivery of health systems or healthcare is concerned. So with WHO taking the lead, we are pretty much sure of the fact that this fund, which will be a part of PTR, will be utilized in a way which is more uniformly distributed across the world.
Right, Dr. Arora, yes,
I would
please.
like to add to this issue, because I was involved and I was co-chair of the independent expert group for COVAX facility, which was part of a global facility for distribution of vaccines. It was not the kind of, the performance was not the best it could have because of various reasons, but I think there are very important lessons. So continuing what Dr. Raina is saying, that those lessons should be collated, so that if WHO plays a central role in a kind of supporting this, I think some of those lessons are very important, and India itself, how we went kind of extra mile to support a lot of low and middle income countries. So many of these experiences will be extremely useful when we want to very efficiently use these resources which we are talking about for low and middle income countries.
We've also had our lessons, Dr. Arora, when it comes to cross-border transmission of pathogens, particularly in the case of the COVID-19 pandemic. And looking at the current situation, there's a spike in cases in China, in United States, in Brazil, Japan, to name a few. India has contained its cases to around 1,200 cases per week, but that number is 35,000 per week around the world. So do you think that this is also a forum to deliberate on how to avoid cross-border travel of pathogens?
So I would differ a little bit. The pathogens do not know the boundaries.
Absolutely.
And so they travel. Last 3 years has given us very clear examples that if a variant appears anywhere in the world, it is a matter of time that it will come up in our country also. Now the question is how best to utilize the intervening period and how to prepare it for ourselves. And I think this is what is important thing, that what we are seeing in our neighbor China at the moment, because there was such big restrictions that they decelerated or did not allow the virus to spread, and now they are having difficulty. Therefore, these are lessons by itself, that when cross-border transmission is occurring, how to manage it and how to put it in a graded format so that we are able to handle these, we are able to manage the infection, disease, severity in a manner which our health system is able to handle it. But particularly viruses, I don't think they respect boundaries, and therefore we need to learn that how we kind of put it in a graduated manner so that things do not go out of control.
Right. So is surveillance a part of that? I must mention here that there are 35 lakh cases globally, and India is reporting 1,200 cases every week. I'll come to you, Dr. Raina, on that. The importance of global surveillance for prevention.
That's absolutely must. We have learned it from China very recently. And if you look at China, China adopted a very tight compartmentalized strategy of zero COVID. It didn't use a multi-stakeholder or multiple strategies to counter the pandemic, thinking of the fact that they will box in the infection and they will take care of the pandemic. But it doesn't work like that, as Dr. Arora rightly pointed out. Infection anywhere is infection everywhere. So as long as there is a virus circulating somewhere and causing an infection, it has always a chance of coming back to you. So probably sharing the data, that's where we need to be more willing to share the data. So cross-border sharing of data, one country who is suffering from a particular type of epidemic or disease or outbreak is willing to share the data with others, and helping people to prepare for the chances of this outbreak or epidemic getting into a pandemic mode is the key. And in that sense, surveillance, not just in terms of establishing surveillance labs across the world. So we may have 10, 11, 20 surveillance labs which will take care of new infections coming up or new pathogens coming up. I would say data sharing should be the key. Everybody should be willing to share, add to this surveillance system. We have the surveillance system, but unfortunately we have not been able to pick up, say for example, COVID-19 pandemic. Surveillance systems have been established there. So probably building into those surveillance systems, giving inputs to those surveillance systems, sharing data, and being able to freely make ourselves available to scrutiny should be the key as far as the future is concerned.
Right. Dr. Arora had earlier spoken about genomic surveillance as well. Now, I want to take your views, Dr. Arora, on whether you think India today is leading by example. It is commanding respect as someone which is coming up with health solutions, digital as well as non-digital, making COVID app available as an open source platform. We've talked about how India has exported vaccines, therapeutics and testing kits. India provides for 60% of the global demand when it comes to vaccines, and there is focus on holistic healthcare as well. There is a lot that India is doing in terms of Ayurveda, yoga. International Yoga Day has come into being. International Year of Millets has been announced for 2023. This is also under India's global leadership. India had pushed for it at the UN. So, is the global community looking at India as a solution provider, as a resource sharer as well?
So I will cite few examples how we have shown it by taking a lead on that. So let me start with, for example, I talked about the equipments. Let us talk about the vaccines, and in vaccines particularly I will talk about, for example, mRNA vaccine. Now mRNA vaccine produced in India is meant for resource constrained environments. The vaccine is stored and transported at 2 to 8 degrees. Now this is something which the rest of the world has not been able to do it, because at the back of our mind we were always that the vaccine or the access and the affordability are both very important. Another example is, I think India has emerged as a very important manufacturers of low cost ventilators, and now India is net exporter, and I think this technology can be shared with other countries. COVID is, you have already shown it on the screen, how COVID is being considered as one of the best solution for vaccine monitoring. But now we know within this country, the same vaccine, the COVID platform can be used for other pediatric vaccines in the other, and also it is a tool for strengthening health system. So what Dr. Raina was saying, that health system strengthening is also required, and IT solutions like this can be extremely important, and digital health and ABHA approach, which ABDN program for which India is taking up. I think these are all solutions where India can be a leader and can be a great kind of a partner with for all the other countries. I would say even high income countries would benefit from something like this. And finally, I would make another comment which may look a little out of the way. I was looking at the millet thing. Now celiac disease is something which affects all age groups. In India, almost 1% of the population is having celiac disease, and celiac disease means they cannot tolerate gluten or wheat. Now millet is an example that it is so cheap, and many of our poor people are not able to afford very high cost gluten-free foods and other things. So this can be incorporated. Similarly, millets is a great, there are evidences, scientific evidence that if you are taking millet, your diabetes is a better controlled. So we are providing leadership and solution in very diverse way, in our traditional manner as well as cutting edge technology.
We leave it at that, Dr. Arora and Dr. Raina. Thank you so much for joining us with your views on how India is trying to create a healthier tomorrow under its G20 presidency. India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant has spent his thoughts on the path ahead, India and G20, in the November 2022 edition of Mann Ki Baat booklet. He writes about how India's G20 presidency is a matter of great honor and greater responsibility, as G20 accounts for 85% of the world's GDP. He further writes, our nation has entered the Amrit Kal, a period marked by a transformative journey to development and social progress. It will also set the standards for a global developmental trajectory. India, now the fifth largest economy and a leading moral force in the international community, has also taken up the G20 presidency. Amitabh Kant also asserts that India will look to emerge as a bridge or a setu between the developed and developing states. He writes, India's model of development has set the benchmark for social progress and inclusive growth globally. As the G20 presidency, India will look to emerge as a bridge or a setu between the developed and developing states for enhanced cooperation. Kant also highlights the priority areas for India's G20 presidency. He writes, the priority areas for our presidency include Mission Life, that is lifestyle for environment, financing for SDGs, green energy transitions, food security and ensuring reliable supply chains for food and energy, and digital transformation, among others. Writing on disaster resilience, Kant asserts the constitution of a new working group on disaster risk reduction would be a unique contribution of our presidency. In this working group, we will aim to strengthen consensus over ways in which we collectively achieve disaster resilience at national and international levels. Emphasizing on the unique opportunity for action-oriented agenda, he concludes his article by saying the G20 presidency is a unique opportunity to drive an action-oriented agenda to shape a world which is inclusive and sustainable by building consensus for action. Our demographic strengths, our capacity for innovation and our diversity support help in our emergence as a global leader. By sharing our story of digital transformation through the G20 platform, India could pave the way and the path ahead to a global digital revolution. The world is closely watching as India takes on the reins of the G20 presidency to shape our one future. The world is clearly watching, and with that, I'll take your leave in this edition of India at G20. Thanks for watching.
जल्दी करो यार, प्लीज जल्दी।
दूसरा कोई मैच है क्या?
ऐसा ही कुछ है यार, बैंक जाना है दादाजी को लेके।
हाँ यार, उम्र होने पर कभी कभी मदद तो लगती है,
पर बैंकिंग में नहीं।
वैसे भी आरबीआई कहता है सीनियर सिटीजन सबसे पहले। अगर आप 70 साल से ऊपर हैं और आप बैंक नहीं जा सकते तो बैंक आएगा आपके